We are talking about toxicity today. I know we have all had some toxic things in our life, and I want to give you guys some pointers today of how to cut toxic people or things out of your life. And I have a lot of personal stories that I'll share with you guys, just so you know that I'm not speaking out the side of my mouth. Like, I've actually lived through some things, and I just genuinely want to help other people. So this is the look, and we are going to talk about you're toxic, I'm out of here.
I'm out of here.
So this topic is a doozy to start with, isn't it? Really quick, my story on toxicity in 2016 is when my toxicity in my life had peaked. And ironically, this is when my business was doing the absolute best. This is when Makeup Geek was at peak sales. It was doing 22 million a year. It skyrocketed. Everything on the business front seemed to be doing really great. But in my personal life, I was surrounded by toxic people, toxic things, toxic environment, toxic friendships. Everything was toxic, toxic, toxic. To the point, you guys, in my personal life, I was severely depressed. I was trying not to show that because, here my business is doing absolutely amazing, but in my personal life, I'm in an abusive relationship. I have friends that are wanting to use me just because they know that I'm in the public eye and they know that my company's doing really well and there's financial benefit for them and all these things. And that toxicity, you guys, got so much that I knew I had to make some severe changes in my life or I literally would not be sitting here right now. And that's a really deep story that I'm not ready to get into in this video, you guys, but it is for real. So when I talk about toxicity, like, I have genuinely lived through it, and I really want to help other people to first realize that you have toxicity in my life, because I wasn't even aware, you guys. It had happened so gradually, and one thing after another. I didn't even realize how toxic it was till I literally had hit rock bottom. So that's what I want to talk about and give some pointers. So I have 5 ways to cut out toxic people and toxic things out of your life. So the first thing is you have to identify it. Like I said, I didn't even know that I had toxicity in my life because I was just doing my thing and hustling for work until my health started to take an effect. My panic attacks were out of control. My health took just a complete nosedive, and my doctor was like, okay, you're literally going to have severe health issues if you don't make some changes into your life. So you have to identify what it is that's toxic, and sometimes it's not really obvious. For me, I had a lot of toxicity. I had to identify what the very, very top one for me was, and that was my relationship. I was in an abusive relationship, and until I had gotten out of that relationship, it didn't matter how much I worked on my business, on friendships, on my environment, on whatever else. Until I got rid of that core toxic thing in my life, I would always be surrounded by that. So I went through the process. It was absolutely brutal, really difficult. I mean, literally, you guys, one day my mom had come with me with big black garbage bags, and I just shoved everything that was of value in these bags, changed my locks, got out, stayed with my mom. I did whatever I had to do. I got a restraining order. I did all these things to get out of this abusive relationship, and it was really, really hard. And for a while, obviously it took a while for my toxicity and things to change in my life, but even just getting out of that environment, you guys, the deep breath I took and this massive burden, it was like I took this huge breath. I didn't even realize how much I was personally affected until I got out of that environment, and it hit me. I was like, wow, this is what it feels like to not be surrounded by such toxicity. The other thing that was toxic for me outside of my abusive relationship was my environment. And a lot of people, when they think of toxicity, they don't really think of, where you're living, but it can become toxic. So I was in LA. Please, anyone from LA, do not come torch my house. I know everyone's gonna be like, oh, she says LA is toxic. No. It was toxic for me. So I moved to LA because I had Makeup Geek. It was all the labs and manufacturers, and the whole business is down in LA. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna move down there. And ironically, I moved down there partly because of my abusive relationship too. We were living in Sacramento, and it was kind of my way of escaping. LA ended up being toxic for me because I already deal with panic attacks. I live a high stress life. Me being in LA, because it was already very high paced, and there wasn't a lot of nature and trees and lakes and things like that. I mean, I know there's some nature, but I wasn't surrounded by that. I had to realize realized that I have to live in a place that's surrounded by nature and trees. That's very therapeutic for me. That's not the case for everyone, but LA, you know, it was busy, it was fast paced, and even some of the people that I was surrounded by while living in LA were, you know, trying to find out what they could get from me, how they could social climb, how they could, you know, get on camera or get money from me or whatever. And it just became such an toxic environment, you all, that I had to identify that, look, this is not working for me living in LA. And you guys, I lost my shirt moving out. I listed my house for sale, got out of there really quick. I literally lost my shirt on it, but it came to such a point that is either me not being on this earth because it got to that point of being so bad and so toxic, or I can make some severe and drastic changes that I have to just to make sure that I'm okay. So I got out of LA, I ended up moving to Washington, and that was why, is because there were so many trees and nature, and it just made my soul happy to be surrounded by that. And I know that's not feasible for everyone, like, oh, Marlena's telling me to up and move and sell my house. I'm not saying that you have to do that at all, but there's certain, you know, other smaller changes that you can make. Maybe it's a work environment. You try to find a job somewhere else where it's not a toxic environment. But first, you have to identify what it is, a person, a place, or an object. So step number 2 then is to communicate. And I know this sounds kind of crazy. Obviously, in my case with the abusive relationship, there was communication that happened, but obviously it's not going to go well with someone who's abusive. But say it's a friend, and that friend is a bit toxic in your life. And I know this may sound crazy, but they may not even realize it. It's something that they're doing that's just for you personally is causing some tension or some toxicity. You have to let them know to give them the opportunity to try to fix it. Sometimes you have to communicate that. If it's an object, you have to communicate to yourself. I know this sounds crazy. You're like, oh, give yourself a little pep talk, but I swear it works, you guys. So you have to, you know, tell yourself, like, for example, you know, you guys know I've struggled with weight and everything. You know, my nemesis is Taco Bell. It's not McDonald's, it's not Burger King, it's Taco Bell. And for me, Taco Bell can be toxic for my, you know, eating healthy. And so I had to tell myself, I had to have a little conversation in my head, be like, okay, I cannot drive to Taco Bell. This is not working for me. I have to like tell myself, I have to first identify, like, look, this is not part of my healthy eating. I need to make some changes. I had to like have that conversation with myself. I know it sounds kind of crazy, you guys, but just trust me. And then if it's a toxic place, like I said, a place that you're living, I mean, if you have a partner, you have a spouse, I mean, if it's something big and you have to move, you have to communicate that with your family, your loved ones, and say, look, like, I'm really not happy here. This is not working for me. Like Washington, you guys, my husband had a hard time in Washington because it was rainy and overcast all the time. And he grew up in a place where it was really sunny and kind of tropical. And so for him, Washington was really starting to affect him. So we ended up moving from there. That was one of the reasons. And he communicated that with me, like, look, I'm really having a hard time here. So you have to communicate to your loved ones, to yourself, you know, what the toxicity is, so you know then how to fix it. So now you've identified, now you've communicated. Here comes the hardest one. Step number 3 is to set some boundaries. This is the hardest one for me, you guys. You have to start setting boundaries. That friend that is texting you 30 times a day and it's starting to really affect you, you have to set boundaries. Say, hey, you cannot text me this much. You know, maybe it's even a boss at work that is giving, you know, calling you at 8 o'clock at night on, you know, a Saturday. You have to set boundaries. Say, hey, this isn't my work time. I will get to that 8 a.m. Monday morning. You have to start setting boundaries. This is really hard. I think especially for women, I think we are such people pleasers and, you know, we want to do our best and be our best. But if we don't set those boundaries, that toxicity really starts building up, you guys. It really starts affecting, at least for me, it did. My health went to crap. It was awful. So for example, if it's a toxic place, like I said, Taco Bell, my boundaries for myself is I have to not drive by that. I have to set boundaries, be like, I am not driving by this. If I have to go a different route, then that's what I have to do to set boundaries for myself, to know that I'm not going to go by Taco Bell today and get some crunchy taco supremes. If it's a toxic thing, like for example, it's cigarettes, you know, you shouldn't be smoking them and you smoke 3 a day. So for me, I'm not a person where I can just cold turkey cut it out. If someone tells me I have to cut something cold turkey, I'm like, oh, I'm going to have it now. I want it more. So I set boundaries and say, okay, instead of you having it 3 times a day, you're going to do it 2. And then you're going to have just 1 a day. And you start kind of, you know, cutting back in these gradual steps. That's setting a boundary. That's starting to set boundaries and say, look, I'm not going to have this whatever 3 times a day. So there are very strategic things that you can do, that you can set boundaries so that you have an opportunity to actually make that change in your life, versus it just being this cut them out, like, let's do baby steps first before we get to that next step, which is number 4, and that's block. So step number 4, blocking. my story with this, I had a friend, and she was not actually a bad person, but she was extremely needy and was texting me multiple times a day. And if I wasn't able to respond, it was always some sort of emergency that came up. And over time, this was when I was dealing with my abusive relationship. I literally was at court, you all, getting a restraining order. I'm peak of the most stress in my life. And she was sending me text messages about something super random. And I wasn't able to respond. And finally I was like, I am actually in court right now. Please stop blowing up my phone. And it got to the point where this person, again, not a bad person, but it just, for me, it became toxic. I couldn't deal with the constant need for attention because I just, at that time in my life, I couldn't take on anymore. I was at breaking point. So I blocked that person. I let them know, like, look, I can't do this anymore. I care about you, but this friendship, I can't do this. So I was beyond setting boundaries at this point, you guys. I just had to block. And at that point in my life, I had blocked and cut out so many people and places and things. You guys, it got to the point where I got my inner circle and my inner surroundings so incredibly tight. It was like this big. It was just immediate family and 2 closest friends, and that was it. I had to get to that point, you guys, to survive. And in that moment, I felt so guilty. Even a couple years later, you guys, and this was back in 2016. This is now 2023. It took me a long time not to feel guilt over that because I thought that I was doing something wrong for protecting myself, protecting my sanity, and cutting that toxicity out of my life. But if I didn't do that, what was the other option? Just that's one little side note I wanted to say, especially for us women, you guys. I think we feel guilty because it feels like we're being a bad person by setting boundaries or by cutting people out of your life. No, if they are bringing toxicity to your life, and you just have to be like, look, this is not for me. And the sooner you can get that toxicity out of your life, the better that you can move on and be peaceful and happy. That's our ultimate goal. So I blocked and deleted so many people, you guys. I got a new phone number. And when it comes to other things, like I said earlier about your environment or whatever, if it's a toxic environment, get the heck out of there. Do whatever it takes. Like I moved out of LA, I lost my shirt financially. It was devastating, but I had to do what I had to do to get the toxicity out of my life. And if it's a job, if it's a boss that's really toxic and you obviously can't change that, okay, time to find another job. Sometimes the toxic decisions, the blocking are really difficult ones. It's not always easy. And I think that's why we stick around or we let that toxicity be there for far longer than we should, because it's not easy to set boundaries and to block these things, but it's so vital for your happiness. You guys like how I just come back and my mascara and lashes are already done? I was like, you don't need to learn how to apply mascara. You know how to do that. So you ready for this last step? So this is step number 5. So we had identify, communicate, set boundaries, block. The last one is to protect yourself. And this is one that I'm actually still dealing with right now, you guys, because it's very easy to go back to your old habits, especially for someone like me who's a recovering people pleaser. I'm much better now, you guys, but I used to try to make everyone so happy and let toxic things and people get in my life. And now I'm in protect mode. I protect my family, myself, my sanity like no other. I do not make new friends very easily. If I do, I'm very slow to introduce people to my life. My environment, I make sure that everything around me is just toxic free. I'm in protect mode, and that's how I'll stay for the rest of my life. You have to just get to that place where you do not let anything toxic come in your life. So I'm trying to talk as I'm doing lip liner, you guys. Again, I'll list everything below if you want to know what I'm using. I've learned I've had to get to a point where I don't want the old life that I had. I don't want the Marlena from 2016, even though business was booming and everything on the outside looked like this wonderland, fairy tale, unicorns and lollipops everywhere. Behind the scenes, it is the most horrific year of my life, and I never want to go back to that. And so I'm in a place now where I'm at peace. Toxicity, it's gone. My life is just happier now, and I don't let that toxicity come in because I remember what my life was like back in 2016, and I will do anything and everything never to go back to that again. So whatever it takes, you all, to keep toxicity out of your life, whatever that looks like for you, if it's, taking a job where you work from home so you know that your work environment, can't have any toxicity. Maybe it's you don't bring a lot of new friends in your life right away. You're very just slow in introducing people in your inner circle. Whatever it looks like for you, I can't say on that. I know for me, I keep my circle very, very small, and I very slowly introduce people in and I'm just very like, I'm rigid at protecting my space, my environment, who I spend time with and all of that. So that's our look. I'm feeling very glamorous today. Not bad for my mom self. Anyways, and I really like this palette. Good job, Huda. This was actually one of my favorites. It's really pretty. But anyways, I hope this conversation was just helpful for any of you out there. Hopefully I didn't come across preachy. I genuinely just want to help others who've gone through some things that I have. So join me next week for another Mornings with Marlena. You guys have fun with your makeup. Stay happy and healthy. Have an amazing week, and I will see you soon. Bye.